Hey, what's going on, everybody? I just want to do a little quick, I guess they call them vlog or whatever. This is not a Victory Life Legacy Spotlight or Legacy Podcast or the Vic 757 show. This is me running my mouth about some thoughts that I've dealt with as a parent now, as a former player, an observer, a guy that covers sports for several years, from doing pregame radio shows for Power Five schools. I've been on ESPNU. I've done broadcasts on ESPN3, and I wrote for Rivals in 247. I played against schools such as West Virginia, at Clemson, at the Old Orange Bowl against the Miami Hurricanes, at UVA, and some great environments in college football. I've mentored several kids who've gone on to college, and guys that have, and female athletes who played collegiately at high levels and mid majors, HBCU. So basically, I'm preferencing my statement by saying I have credibility to speak on this topic, and the topic is code of conduct. It's something that is very difficult to police and keep order on because it's tough, because it's an emotional thing, right? But the code of conduct itself, from youth sports to middle school sports, high school, college, and pros, is something that is talked about. Like during the game, your announcer said, in high school games, you have the players read a statement or the announcer read the statement, and we listen and we clap and we nod. And as soon as the whistle blows, it's forgotten by not everybody, but enough people. Over the last 3 decades, with the emergence of sports and all these ESPN, several channels, and streaming services, the student body, the nation, whether it's this nation, has become part of the program. Back in the day with Texas A&M, it was a 12th man, and they were very tough to beat on the road at Texas A&M. And now you have Blue Devil Nation, Hokie Nation, Wahoo Nation, Terps Nation. You got high schools now that have a student section that's roped off for the big games. This is great. I mean, it's awesome. It's phenomenal. It's legendary. It's iconic. It's pageantry and tradition. It's also become dangerous. And what I mean by that is there's now, and has been for decades, a sense of entitlement where fans have felt like they can just cross the line on social media, especially where I'm at all the time, on Twitter, on Facebook, Instagram. I remember being online several years ago and reading when Matt Schwab, the former UVA great quarterback, and he played with the Falcons and some other units, pro teams. But long story short, he had a very, very bad game. And some fans confronted him at his home, ran up on him in his house, right? And, the police were notified, and, they did their due diligence, but nothing really ever happened subsequently. There was nothing that happened after that. And substantial wise, there was nothing that was really done to protect Matt other than it was reported, right? So what tends to happen is, and what I've seen, I experienced this, as I mentioned, as a father, where my son, who was a good basketball player, plays over at Patriot, experienced him and his teammates, and he's not the first one or the last. And even players I've coached that play for other teams have experienced this. The good thing about my son is he's mentally tough, and I prepared him and my oldest daughter and even my youngest daughter to know when they were young, very little, that when you get to a certain age, you're going to have people, and even sometimes administrators and teachers, are going to look at you differently because of who we're related to, and that's just a harsh reality. Um, and I'm not the only person that has to have that talk with their children. There are people who aren't related to iconic figures that have to deal with that. I remember looking on my cousin Mike Vick's page when him and his wife Kiafa were celebrating their daughter, who's going on to play flag football, female flag football in college, and there's a commercial with her in it, and everybody's talking about how cool the commercial is, and then here comes 2 or 3 people jump on the page just trying to disgrace her and talk about her father, and it's ongoing. As a father, I saw it with my son, where I spoke about it, where people were talking about him and his teammates using words like crackheads and other racial slurs, and of course talking about his relationship with his cousin Mike, and we label it and I say we because I'm in the media, I do a lot of media stuff. Typically it's labeled as passion and intensity and a hostile environment. And we have people that say, well, it is what it is, it's part of the game, which I'm all for the intense. I like a true hostile environment that doesn't cross the line. The truth of the matter is, if I'm on any side of the court or stadium and I can hear it and I can see it, that means if you're close by, you can see it too, and you can hear it as well. But the crazy thing about it is, I remember when Carlos Boozer, everybody knows that follows basketball in the ACC, especially back in the day. If you're old enough, you remember the Maryland Duke rivalry took kind of place of the North Carolina Duke rivalry, and it became intense. The Terp fans and the Cameron crazies were going at it. I remember one year they got a hold of JJ Redick's phone number and harassed him to the point he had to turn his phone off. Carlos Boozer's dad, though, and a great one at Maryland, went off. ESPN got a hold of him. He went off because him, his wife, and his family were harassed, and there was stuff thrown at them, and he went off defending his son and his family. And everyone was like, wow, that's unfortunate. That's just, we gotta be sure to, keep it on the court. But nothing was ever done. I mentioned I had a player that dealt with this, Tay Barber, who I coached for several years on the AAU level. He was at Osborne last year, and they had a great playoff game, district tournament playoff game at John Champ. And he went crazy, just went crazy, was cooking everybody on the court. They won in overtime. And this is not hypothetical. This is not a rumor. This actually happened where an adult man tried to attack and fight him at the game. A man. Now, here's the thing. He should never be allowed to go to a high school VHS held event again. But yet, the code of conduct seems to be only really on players and coaches. Because when you have malice at the palace, when Ron Artest and that whole thing happened with the Pistons and Pacers, Ron Artest and Steven Jackson, everybody was suspended, and they should have been. The fan was taken care of, but there were people more upset about the players when the fan behavior, the code of conduct is that misconduct where the fan threw the drink and all the harassment, that's been going on for years. And when I spoke on my son's situation, there were a few people who hit me, was like, got to be careful because when you speak on it, it's going to bring more attention and more people are going to do it. Here's the thing. My son doesn't care because it gets him going. He cooked them. I don't like it because I work with schools. I work with youth. I know I've heard so much about what we can and cannot do as athletes, as coaches, as players, and even as someone that stands out when I go somewhere. I harass an official. I get personal and say stuff. I know me, I'm gonna be escorted out. And sometimes in rare cases, not even, I shouldn't say rare, in some cases, I can be arrested, right? The truth of the matter is that we have now entered a world, and it's been like this for a while, where the code of conduct just depends on how you want to apply the code to certain people. That's the truth of the matter. Don Staley, the great women's basketball head coach of South Carolina Gamecocks, she spoke about all the things she hears her team goes through. She was a great point guard, played for the USA team. I mean, she's an iconic figure for those that follow women's basketball. If you follow sports, I mean, South Carolina is killing it in women's basketball. And she spoke about all the things her team goes through. And people now say, oh, that's unfortunate, but why is it allowed? Why is why is it tolerated? Why is it acceptable and say, well, players got to fight through it? Why do we label it as a hostile environment? Why is it just not limited to just cheers and booing and whatever else, that's part of the game versus where it gets racial or threatening or aggressive, right? And you might be wondering where this is coming from. I've been sitting on this for a while, but what kind of struck me to kind of post this video was I was on Twitter this morning and I saw, if you follow college football, Texas beat Alabama in Alabama this past weekend on Saturday night. Big primetime game. Texas was 11. I believe Alabama was 3. I don't have it in front of me. But Texas, they cooked them. And there's a video of like 3 or 4 Texas players dancing and doing all the things, just celebrating the win. And Alabama, and this doesn't represent all the Alabama fans, so go easy. It's just whoever they were. I believe they were students, allegedly, but they were definitely on Alabama's side. harassing the Texas players, calling them homophobic slurs, the F word, and telling them to go back to the projects, right? And don't think that happens just at Alabama. That happens everywhere. I remember my redshirt freshman year, Beamer and the older players on the team told me, man, when we get to Morgantown, make sure you keep your helmet on because they throw pints of liquor at you, little bottles or whatever that you hold liquor in, but there's urine in it, and they throw it, keep your helmet on. I remember going there, being called porch monkey, the N-word. This is in the 90s. And it's not just West Virginia, it's not all West Virginia fans. You can go to all schools and find a contingency of people, but there's some places where it's very abundant and it's known and nothing is ever done. It happens in a lot of schools. And I'll be honest with you, I wasn't used to it until I got to Northern Virginia. And I saw these big schools, these Division 6 crowds, and they got the student sections roped off. And I thought it was great. I mean, there's some great competition, some great school spirit. But when does somebody really take advantage of the fact that you have power, you have a voice to do something about it, so people understand at a younger age what should be tolerated? But then again, it happens at youth football and basketball games. It happens in volleyball. My oldest daughter, Sydney, experienced it her junior and senior year. Harassment, not like booing and chants. I'm talking about stuff that crossed the line because she was a Vic or whatever the reason. You can pick a couple. Black, you could always, it is what it is. You see it, I see it. You know, it's interesting what people want to talk about because I remember last year between Unity High School and Osborne High School, a basketball game where the teams got to fight, right? And the comments came immediately. Well, what do you expect? It's Manassas and Osborne and Uni Reed and this, down, whatever. And I saw the Osborne bunch, and those guys really have issues. And the basketball team, which it wasn't even, I believe it wasn't even the varsity teams, right? But you know what we do? We get assumptions, right? We were so quick to speak about that. I say we because I'm in those same groups. I was defending it, but I understand people gonna have their opinions, speaking about it, right? But get quiet when they go to games. They hear people use words like crackheads. You get quiet. You might say, "Oh, that's kids gonna be kids." Why? Why is that acceptable? And I know this. I'll give you a perfect personal example. In 1993, 94 season, I played basketball all 4 years of my time at Hampton High School. My senior year, I didn't play the first couple of games because I was going to focus on finishing the year strong academically and also get ready to go to Virginia Tech on a full athletic scholarship, right? I was wrapping up my recruitment. And Bethel and Hampton, for those that know, is a fierce rivalry, especially back then in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and early 2000s. It was a fierce rivalry in all sports, but especially football and basketball. Allen Iverson, the Hall of Fame guard who was in high school that year, same year as me, was incarcerated for his role in the Mamie My Mom incident, at the bowling alley spare times. You didn't know this, then you just been living under a rock. His nickname back home for where we're from in the 757 is Bubba Chuck. Well, at the game, I'm in the student section. I'm a senior. And one of my friends, I'm not going to say his name, he's part of my crew, but he started chanting, and all of a sudden the chant grew in the early part of the game. And it goes like, "Where is Bubba? Where is Bubba? Where is he? City Farm." City Farm is the jail that he was placed in, the Newport News, where they went, right? Where he went and other offenders went. And the chant's going, "Where is Bubba?" And everyone's chanting it and stomping, and it's getting loud. And you can see parents on Bethel side looking, and even parents on Hampton High side looking at us. And it's a whole bunch of us, and we're chanting and we're jumping up and down because we're being ignorant, but we think it's funny because we didn't know any better. And even though some of us knew, like, oh, it's crazy, we didn't want to stop, but we wanted to be part of it. Well, here's what I know. Miss Mitchell, the mom, and her daughter both oversaw and ran the cheerleading squad at Hampton High. They immediately turned around along with a few other administrators and pointed at us and told us to stop. We stopped for a few minutes and we did it again. And it's loud now. And it's a good game. Tony Rutland's hooping, my longtime brother, and my boy Eric Brown is killing. He's hitting threes, one of my best friends. He is now the head basketball coach at Hampton, right? They're going at it, they're balling. but the chant's crazy. Finally, Miss Mitchell and some other administrators came up there and started. This is before cell phones and the internet and all of that. So you take names, they started taking names down and threatening suspensions and things of that nature, and it stopped. And it just went from cheering to booing to other stuff, but nothing personal. Because looking back, they were right and we were wrong and we were held accountable and it stopped. It's that simple. But that doesn't happen. It doesn't happen on the professional level. It doesn't happen on the collegiate level. It doesn't happen in high school, and it doesn't happen in youth sports. And we all share responsibility because we stand and listen after the national anthem, before the national anthem, and we hear the little statement about the code of conduct, but we never really follow through with it. And it's not all schools, it's not all student sections, it's not all adults. But there are certain places and certain contingencies of students that think it's funny, that think it's appropriate. If you watch the Alabama, Texas video, many people aren't shocked because they've seen it, they've heard it, they've been there. So the reality is a code of conduct, like the honor code, is a living thing where we all have to abide by it, and we all have to make sure that we do something about it in our own way, whether we report it or we say something to a couple of kids at the concessions, or we remind people that it ain't right. Because the ultimate consequence is somebody eventually, which has happened before, is going to get hurt. That's not a threat by me. That's the truth. You got enough evidence, right? But we got to stop with this falsehood and this narrative and this nonsense. Oh, they're being passionate. It's just a great crowd. It's just phenomenal. The pageantry. This is just great. And all that being true with the colors and everyone jumping, I don't have a problem with that. But when J.R. Reed was playing at UNC and he went to Duke and they were holding signs that JR, some of the Cameron crazies, that JR can't read. Or when Coach John Thompson, God rest his soul, talked about Patrick Ewing, they were playing a Big East school and the bananas were thrown on the court. And he pulled his team off the court. I would like for more coaches and more administrators to just hold people accountable. We've gotten real comfortable right now with social media and some of these people out here doing what they want to do and saying what they want to say. Because I'm gonna tell you like this, man. I know people that will start charging people for harassment. You can do it. Walk over there and record them with your phone and take it to the superintendent. Because what players have to endure, this is not back in the day. You should not be calling people out their name in regards to racial or other things, calling people the stuff you see on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. We've gotten out of control. We've been out of control. And I've been saying this long before I jumped on this video to record this. I've been saying it. You know, it's actually embarrassing sometimes because it's not about being a passionate fan. It's about thinking you can get away with being ignorant, right? Calling a kid a crackhead or homophobic slurs because you mad your team is losing, bro. Like the assumptions we make and how we assume things for one group versus another is still crazy to me, but it's always going to happen. But I'm not going to be afraid to speak on it because the truth of the matter is that don't talk to me about sportsmanship and code of conduct before a game and you're in a position of leadership and you don't do anything about it, right? That's the sad part. And the sad part is people like me that cover this stuff, like I've been doing a long time, you have a voice too, but you pick and choose what you want to talk about because it's acceptable to you. That's the truth of the matter, and it shouldn't be. So it works both ways, man. If you expect the players and coaches to be held to a certain standard, to be respectful to the game and show sportsmanship, then fans alike, including student sections, and on all levels, not just high school, but middle school, college, and pro. Well, pro don't have student sections, but it should be more policing and stop blaming on the alcohol, stop blaming on rivalries. I get it. You are not going to be able to stop. I went to a Dallas Washington football game before an NFL decade ago, and I saw at least 9 fights. And it always amazes me how men and women will fight at a football or NBA game when those pros don't care nothing about you. But that's them, that's them. But at least they get arrested, right? After somebody might take a nail, at least people get arrested. But it starts long before they get to that level, because what's happening now, as I said earlier, is that there's a sense of entitlement that people can say and do what they want to do, but it shouldn't be allowed. So if you're really going to talk about the code of conduct, because I can tell you right now, you can have a great atmosphere and a great game without the stuff that's said. I'm not talking about the booing or some of the intense things that are done in the game. I'm not talking about passion, the legit passion. I'm talking about when it gets personal. Because when I experienced it, I was fine because I kind of knew it was coming. And my son did too, and his teammates did. It's the family I had in town that were much older that experienced real harassment during the back in the day when people had to march and fight and sit in for respect, right? You hear it like, and I heard a guy talking to a principal, an assistant principal. It was a group of men around the concessions after the game, and they were like, what's crazy is, man, I heard his father complaining, but the reality is, if his son plays at the next level, he's going to hear much worse. And the guy's right. He's right. And that's part of the problem. The fact that you're going to hear even worse is part of the problem, because it is acceptable. It's been tolerated, but it shouldn't be. You can have intense atmospheres without all that nonsense. Because again, I'm telling you, there's consequences eventually, you know. But that's my 2 cents on it. Hopefully, it makes sense to some people, man. I know some people are going to be upset or confused why I brought it, but I've been sitting on it. I've talked about this before on different platforms I'm on, and I'm just over it. But I know this football season, especially once the games get bigger in the playoffs or rivalry games, and honestly, basketball season, same thing is going to happen. But I know as long as I'm affiliated with sports, I'm not going to allow it to happen, right? When you have a podcast, even if you have a few followers, subscribers, or you have the platform like myself, you have a voice to kind of make a difference too. That's why I challenge all of y'all sometimes to stop having these non-credible people on your platforms just for clicks and views, man. Even when I type stuff on these face group chats, man, I know people are going to read what I write. So I try not to I don't spread misinformation. I don't talk nonsense. There's a time and place for jokes, but stop with the labeling and stop with the assumptions, right? Do your due diligence. If you don't know, say you don't know. Stop it, because you can offend somebody, right? But I know for some of y'all don't care. So anyway, on a positive note, man, for those doing what they're doing to help make this world a better place, salute to you. Thank you for all the people that continue to understand and be part of the Victory Life movement, and also support me in all my endeavors, and continue to support these youth out here that are playing sports, that are going, doing other things in academics, and just, trying to help them find their way to achieve their academic and athletic goals, man. Continue to help them in our community, man. Otherwise, man, salute. I will talk to everyone later. All right.